Welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph Gutierrez and this is covering compounding. In today's video, we're going to take a deeper look at the index lock feature for Allianz Life. Now, this is true for Index Universal Life as well as the fixed index annuity products. Okay, remember, index lock allows us to lock in our gains early in the segment and avoid potential market downturns. Additionally, we'll also take a look at the performance of my policy and see if those gains are worth locking in. Let's check it out. All right, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the index lock feature with Allianz Life. So remember, the index lock allows us to have a little bit more control what's going on inside of our policy strategy. Okay, so we can kind of lock in our gains, lock in our profit before a potential downturn in the market or something like that. Okay, so first things first, we're looking at Allianz Life. Okay, Allianz Life is one of the few carriers that do allow for this locking function. We'll go into why in a little bit here. Okay, they're one of our top rated carriers. We like using them a lot for a lot of different scenarios. Okay, so we have Allianz Life here, and we're talking about the index lock. Remember, the index lock actually has two different functions, two different sub features here. We have a manual lock and we have an auto lock. Okay, so these are essentially like limit orders taking place during our segment period here. So the best way to go about this is to kind of show this as a graph. But before we do that, just a quick reiteration of how indexing works with these types of policies, especially if you're new to the channel or new to Index Universal Life or fixed index annuities. So first things first, remember, when we give our premium to the insurance company, it's going to go into what's called the general account. That general account is tied to mostly bonds and fixed income type instruments, and it produces a yield every year. Part of that yield is going to be siphoned off and used as what's quote unquote the option budget. Okay, that option budget allows us to buy call options against a particular index of your choosing. And when we buy that call option at our anniversary period, we're going to record the start date of that particular index all the way to the end of the segment period. Okay, so for IUL, usually they're 1 year segments. FIAs, maybe you can have a 2 year or 5 year if you choose. But either way, at the end of this segment year, we're also going to record the end date. Okay, so the end date minus the start date. If that number is a positive number, okay, so the end value minus the start value, if that is a positive number, then that's going to be used in our calculation. That percentage gain is going to be used as part of our calculation. So the percent gain times a participation rate times any multipliers equals our net crediting for the year or for that segment period. Okay, so that's how our policies grow internally. That's how that compound interest effect takes place with Index Universal Life and with FIAs primarily. Okay, so now that we have the basics just pinned down there, let's look at a more of a chart overview of this and how we can utilize this extra feature. Remember, this is an optional feature. It comes with it. It's not an extra charge. It's just something that Allianz provides for those types of clients that kind of want to have a more hands-on approach to their tax-free wealth, okay, inside their policies. Okay, so we're going to draw this out. All right. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So remember, everything is based on the price action of the underlying index. So just for the sake of simplicity, let's say our start value is a value of 100 for whatever index strategy that we're tied to. And let's say, for instance, it's January 25, okay? And it's a 1 year strategy, so all the way to January 26. All right, cool. So the price action of this index, let's say it's kind of chaotic, kind of volatile, just like the rest of the market is in these days. So let's say we're going to go up, we're going to go down, and then we're kind of do this. Okay, so we're going to see some price action. We're going to see some peaks and troughs here. And our end value, let's say this value is, I don't know, 105. Okay, and the peak was 120. Cool. So when we do the math, remember, we're going to take the 105 minus the 100, divide by 100, times 100 to get our percent change. Okay, so in this case, it's 5% times our participation rate. Okay, let's say the participation rate's 100%. So our end value is 5%. So we have a 5% gain. Great, okay? The thing is that, a lot of clients will be like, well, we were up 20% for the year, and then all of a sudden, the president puts out a crazy tweet or some other kind of market disturbance happens and we shot back down. So I only caught a little bit of a gain, okay? And this can happen with these fixed index type products. The first thing to remember is that markets tend to average out and that we shouldn't just look at a 1 year time scale, okay? So we should look multiple years out. So if we subscribe to any kind of efficient market theory, basically whatever the market is doing at any particular time, any of those disturbances, the market will end up repricing back to where it should be. So the market may trough down in January 2026, but it's likely that it's going to kind of continue on up and kind of do this kind of price action. Okay, so we may end way better in the second year and make up for a poor year, right? So January 27, we may be up to, I don't know, 130 in this example. Okay, so our 5% gain, which is, a little bit lower than we expect, usually with FIAs and IULs, we tend to be usually in the 6 to 8% range on average. Maybe we have a blowout great year for the second year and capture that gain. Okay, so then we can average them out and see how we're doing over the long run. So, markets tend to do something like this, and we can draw a little best fit line, and we kind of have a pretty good idea of what our performance will be. That's where that whole 8 to 10% gain over the years and the S&P 500, things like that. That's where that comes from. Okay, so we're going to have fluctuations. All that said, let's say we'll go back to the 1 year time scale here. All that said, let's say we want a little bit extra control over our index universal life policy or fixed index annuity, and we want to be able to maybe lock in at the top of the price action, because in this example, we did go all the way up to right here about 120. Okay, so this 120 may be the top of the market before we had the bad news that brought us back down. So how could we utilize these locking functions to accomplish that? Well, one of the obvious things to do is just manually lock. So let's say we're about 2/3 of the way through the year and we lock in, I don't know, right here at price of 115. Okay, so we lock in 15, we're up 15%. That's pretty good. Go ahead and lock us in. So we can utilize this manual lock feature inside of our portal with Allianz Life and then lock in that 50% gain. And then we're going to be credited 15% times the participation times any multipliers. We'll be credited that gain in January 2026. Okay, so we were able to lock it in. Now, what's the negative? What's the drawback of the manual lock? Well, we missed out on kind of the top of the market, as the market obviously went up to 120 in this example. Okay, so the top of this strategy here, the index strategy, went all the way up to 120, but we locked ourselves out of it. So it's kind of a two-edged sword here. We have potential lockout any kind of losses, but we also may lock ourselves out of a potential gain. Okay, so that is kind of the pluses minuses of the manual lock. So you may want to use that sparingly. What I really do like though is this auto lock feature. So the auto lock, it kind of is more like limit orders on your account. Okay, if you're familiar with that, if you're in the kind of Wall Street stock world. So basically we put an upper and lower bound, as far as what we'll accept as our lock price. So let's say, for instance, we have our upper bound at around 120, okay? And we have our lower bound, I don't know, we'll say maybe 107. Okay, so we could say in this example, we'll say we're at 120 on our upper, and we're at 107 on our lower. So we will lock out automatically if the price action hits 120, and we'll also lock out automatically if we're at 107. So we could choose to select one of these options here in the middle of the year if our price is, in between these boundaries. So let's say the price action brought us to 115 on this particular index. We can elect to put in these auto lock upper bounds to kind of lock in our gains here. So just in case we continue on and hit our upper boundary, then we're going to lock in this case, 120. If we start to come back down, we'll lock in at a 105 or a 107 target here, okay? So this auto lock feature kind of resembles if you're into if you're into option contracts, things like that. These are kind of like calls and puts, right? So we could call this like a call. Shares get called away, and then a put. Okay, so the reason I kind of bring that up is that this auto lock and locking feature is pretty unique to Allianz Life because Allianz actually has their own trading desk. Okay, they have their own business unit that takes care of these trades and allows us to have this extra functionality. Okay, it's the acronym is AIM, the Allianz Investment Management Company inside of the Allianz framework. Okay, so I jokingly like to call them a bunch of math PhDs kind of in a basement somewhere with no windows and 5 computer screens. And all day long, they're doing all these different orders of call options, put options, and tracking alongside of whatever these indexes are doing.
You're completely sure of the math.
Look at him. That's my quant.
Your what?
My quantitative. My math specialist. Look at him. You notice anything different about him? Look at his face.
Okay, obviously I'm joking. I'm sure they have windows where they're at, but nonetheless, one of the things to remember is that Allianz, because they're so successful of a company and they're so big, they own PIMCO, you'll see them on CNBC all the time. Because they have this extra business unit, they're able to kind of lower their maybe option costs associated with putting this together and give us this functionality of the index lock. Okay, so it's a pretty cool feature all around, and it's great for people that are a little more hands-on with their investments. Okay, so now that we have that kind of pinned down and understand the manual and auto lock features, let's go ahead and take a look at my own policy and see if it's worth locking in or placing any kind of limits to lock in our gains. Let's take a look. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look at my own policy. So I have an index universal life policy with Allianz Life. We're going to look at the price action, the performance so far. Okay, so my anniversary year, our crediting term is all the way up until about September. Okay, so it's June right now. So it may be a good idea to maybe lock in my gains, especially if I think that the market may be a little bit top heavy and we may see a decline in this year. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump on over. All right, so I'm going to log in. All right, and I'm going to scroll on down to get to personal accounts. So remember, when you are a customer with Allianz Life, you're going to have access to look at various information, do illustrations, okay, in-service illustrations. You can also make your own index locks if you choose to, or if I'm your agent, we can do it together and kind of look at how your indexes have performed for the year and decide whether a lock or setting upper or lower limits makes sense. Okay, so all right, we're logged in here. So let's go ahead and jump on in, look at the index targets and locking. So a few acknowledgments before we get started here. So I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit here. All right, so we understand that the values being displayed are based on the end of the prior business day. Okay, so they go by end of business day final numbers. Okay, so I understand the manual lock is requested. The lock-in value may be slightly higher or lower of the index value at the time of day because the locking takes place at the end of the business day. Okay, roughly like 4 o'clock. Eastern time. I understand that by setting the target through auto lock, I'm authorizing Allianz Life to automatically execute the index lock at the end of the business day, and in which a target is reached. I understand the locking value might end up greater than the upper or lower target. So remember, the index price action may hit the target, may trigger the auto lock, but that auto lock doesn't set until the end of the day. So the price action may continue to push us up beyond the upper bound or below the lower bound, depending on which target was hit. But it all depends on what the end value is for that business day. Okay. And then obviously understand that with both manual and auto locks will not process for a index value of 0. Okay. So if we have a 0 year, if our starting value is higher than the current value of that index, well, then obviously it's not going to process because the call option is not positive. So we're still technically at a 0 year in that case. Okay, so remember, Index Universal Life, FIAs, they're insurance-based products. So if the index goes south, if it goes below our starting value, the worst we could have is a 0 year. We're not going to have a negative year. If the call option just expires worthless and we just roll for the next year. Okay, those are 0 years. They happen. Okay, just on average, the indexes do pretty well. You know, kind of the 6 to 8% range on average. Okay. All right, moving on here. So it's going to give us some instructions, some basics here, and we're going to scroll on down. So values of 6/16/2026. Okay, so I can see how my indexes have done for the year. So I'm allocated to the bonus uh, Bloomberg US Dynamic Balanced number 3 ER index. I know that's a mouthful there. And we're also 50% allocated to the S&P 500 Futures Index ER, annual point to point. Okay, so we can see that we have a 50-50 split between the two and our participation rates. And we can see right here that the index interest rate for the year before the bonus, because remember I get a 15% bonus on top of whatever, on top of our participation rate, whatever our calculus is there. I can see that my index interest rate is 7.81% for the Bloomberg and 8.15%. And it's important to note that up here, as it says, targets and the manual lock are based on the index rate percentage before the bonus. Okay, so just remember it's before the bonus. The bonus is pushing me into the 8.99 and 9.37 range. So that's pretty good all around. I do remember the previous year wasn't so great. Okay, so I'm kind of recuperating from that point. So I hit a little bit of a trough as we talked about in our example here last September, and now I'm seeing like kind of heightened gains here. Okay, so pretty good gains all around. So we can see here we have an upper target, lower target. We can renew our upper target, or we can manually lock today and just say, okay, I like those gains, lock it in right now. And then we obviously can put in our upper and lower bounds, our call and put if you want to call it that like that. Okay, so for me, I kind of like where we are right now. I am a little skeptical of the market for the second half of the year. Okay, we're in June right now, about the middle of June. I think the second half is going to be a little shaky, so I am going to make use of the auto lock functions. So what I'll probably put here for my upper target is probably about 15%, and my lower target, I may do like 6%. Okay, and I'll probably put that for both. Whoops, 15% and 6%. Okay, so if the index interest rate drops down to 6%, it's going to trigger my lock and I'll lock in for the remainder of the year. Okay, and if for either index, and conversely, if my upper target is hit at 15% on the index interest rate for either one of these, then it'll lock in. Okay, so go ahead and hit continue. Okay, and then I can accept and submit the request. Okay. Okay, and it's going to load, and it's going to give us this this page here, and it'll say it won't be reflected on the website for another 1 to 2 business days, but I've at least kind of covered my bases in a sense. So I put down some safety on my index strategies here, so that I can lock in those gains and hopefully not get much lower than 6% before the bonus. So it's probably going to be closer to about 7 or so, or on the upper range of about 15 plus there. Okay, so this is a great feature for those people that are kind of more tied to the market and kind of want a little more hands-on activity with their index. Okay, it's not something you have to do every day. It's not something you have to stare at religiously on the screen, but it is a feature that we can make use of if we feel it's necessary. Okay, thank you for watching today's video. We took a deeper look at the index lock feature with Allianz Life. We can see how we can utilize it to lock in our gains throughout the segment year, especially if we see a lot of volatility in the market that may kind of strip out our gains. Okay, so we want to lock in those gains. We can utilize the manual lock if we're happy with where we're at in the particular year, or we can utilize the auto lock. Okay, so what we talked about how trading works in a general sense, and we also looked at a little example of when we could use either options. Okay, we also took a look at my own policy and how I'm doing for the year, and I'm kind of up around the 9% range, and how I can utilize my upper and lower bounds for the auto locking, so that in case the market does take a dip, I can kind of cement my gains and not have them shed from any kind of price action or any kind of craziness that may be going on in the months ahead. Okay. Once again, thanks for watching. Be sure to check out our new ebook here on the foundational asset. Okay, this is where we get uninterrupted compound interest that grows and we can access tax-free. Okay, whole life or index universal life. We talk about the strategy in this book and how we can design a policy for you so you can build your own tax-free wealth. Okay, either whole life or index universal life works great. And part of the reason we put the ebook together is to give our clients, our potential clients, more information on how these policies are supposed to be put together and how they can build their own tax-free wealth. Okay. Once again, thanks for watching. If you're interested in putting together your own policy, whether IUL, a fixed index annuity, whole life, what have you, feel free to click the link in the description. It'll take you to our webpage where you can see much of our information. You can see articles, you can download your free ebook, and you can also click the Book Now button for a free online consultation. And during that first consultation, it's basically a discovery call, just to get an idea of your situation, what you're looking to do with a policy, and how we can best serve you so you can build your own tax-free wealth. Okay, thanks again for watching. Feel free to click like and subscribe. Ring the bell for future notifications on our new content. And I look forward to helping you build your tax-free wealth with the foundational asset. Until next time.